cannot remember how to transfer data from an old phone to a new phone. I give up. You might remember about a month ago, the last video in this series, we talked about Endless Summer from 1974. The double LP set that is perhaps the most important compilation album or greatest hits album in the entire Beach Boys catalog. This album was a massive success and completely revamped the group's image, their popularity, and their career trajectory. We also know that the Endless Summer album was made mostly as a response to the success of the Red and Blue albums that were released as the Beatles collections, I should say, released through Capitol, Apple, and EMI. The Red and Blue albums were also massive hits and completely rekindled popular interest in the Beatles, I should say. It should be noted that the Red and Blue albums are complements. If you listen to Red, then to Blue, you've basically just listened to kind of an encapsulated version of the Beatles' discography and their entire career. So naturally, we know, because it's the Beach Boys, when one is a success, there's another one to follow. But instead of taking that model and releasing something that follows up on Endless Summer, picking up in late 1965 or early 1966, and then going through maybe 1968, 1970, 1972, instead we get a supplemental release. Released in spring of 1975, we got Spirit of America, the subject of today. Endless Summer Part 2. I mentioned supplemental because instead of picking up where Endless Summer left off and moving into the future, Spirit of America opted instead to stay in that time period, 1962 to 1965, for the most part, we'll get to that in a minute, and just focus on songs that were not included in that initial album, or I should say in this initial 2 LP set. It's an odd choice, and maybe not the most bankable, but it does give Spirit of America a very unique sort of place in the Beach Boys catalog. I will now read off the songs on here using the CD. We have Dance, 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 Breakaway, A Young Man Is Gone, 409, The Little Girl I Once Knew, Spirit of America, Little Honda, Hushabye, Hawaii, Drive-In, Good to My Baby, Tell Me Why, Do You Remember, This Car of Mine, Please Let Me Wonder, Why Do Fools Fall in Love, Custom Machine, Barbara Ann, Salt Lake City, Don't Back Down, When I Grow Up to Be a Man, Do You Want to Dance, and Graduation Day. 23 songs. Again, on 2 LPs, at least originally on 2 LPs. So there were a few songs on there that were major charting songs that were left off of Endless Summer. Notably, Do You Want to Dance, When I Grew Up to Be a Man, and the top 20 hit The Little Girl I Once Knew. All of which could very well have been on here, but were passed over for whatever reason. So it makes sense to have some of those big charting songs that we didn't get last time on here. But then they do something interesting. They bring in the covers. Endless Summer is unique because it has no covers. It is entirely Beach Boys originals. Really the only major compilation album to do this. But Spirit of America opted to bring in those covers. We have some very successful ones like Barbara Ann, the group's most successful cover of all time, and Do You Want to Dance, their second most successful cover of the 60s. Then we have a couple that are associated with their live set, like Graduation Day and Hushabye. And then we have some that never really caught on, a minor charting B-side with Why Do Fools Fall in Love, and their cover of the Beatles' Tell Me Why, which is really not Americans. I'm not sure why they put it on here, but who knows. Something different, I guess. We also have a few kind of popular Beach Boys B-sides. For example, 409, Please Let Me Wonder, ones that fans would know and recognize, and then the rest of the album is comprised of album cuts, rare stuff, things where you start digging a little bit deeper into their discography. And then we have Breakaway. We'll come back to Breakaway in just a moment. We do see quite a few of those popular live cuts. I've already mentioned their cover of Hushabye, but songs like Little Honda and Wendy were very much associated with the group in the 1960s on the touring circuit. Hawaii would be another one to add to that list, and that helps to balance out these kind of one-off album cuts, like This Car of Mine, Do You Remember. Even songs that are popular now, like Salt Lake City, weren't really big hits in the 60s, or really hits at all. They were album cuts. So it's nice to see them sort of compiled here and put along better known material to help sort of sell the album. So we got to talk about the elephant in the room. There's one song on here that doesn't fall between 1962 and 1965, and that is their 1969 single, Breakaway. It gets the second track on the entire album. Breakaway was a massive hit in the UK and throughout Europe. It was actually a top 10 hit in the UK and did very well otherwise. Didn't really make much of an impact in the US. Made the top 70 or so. Not really one of their more popular tunes. But it's interesting that it's here because Breakaway was never released on an LP. It came out the same year as 2020, but it wasn't included there. It was strictly a single only. The UK loved it, and so it's popped up on many UK hits packages. Here's the most famous of all the British hits packages there, 20 Golden Greats. You can see it at the end there. But in the US, it's never really been a thing. And when we have seen it pop up on different sets throughout the years, it's often been with like alternate takes or different mixes, with different people singing on them, different arrangements, things like that. These archival releases kind of go for different vibes with it. They don't use the original. Even Feel Flows, the set that was supposed to celebrate 1969, 1970, 1971, kind of skimmed over Breakaway. Only the single mix and a very small a cappella backing vocal fragment were included, and that was it. So it's a song that just never really caught on. I think it was included here strictly to give it an LP release in hopes of drawing more people into becoming fans of it. That's my theory. I think Breakaway is a great song. It's one of their best of the late 60s, and I think it's the best of their kind of personal liberation songs. You know, you're the one sometimes making yourself upset or angry. You need to break away from what's troubling you and live life the way you want. It's a great song. I'm glad it's here, and for being so much newer than the other tracks on the album, about 4 years difference, it actually doesn't really stick out too much. And putting it after Dance, Dance, Dance was a wise choice to go from one upbeat song right to the next. So speaking of which, the track list on here. Let's talk about that. Endless Summer went with a mostly chronological vibe, with a couple thematic changes here and there just to kind of help the album flow. I cannot find a pattern on Spirit of America. I like that it opens with Dance, 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 which was one of the few major hits that hadn't been released yet, so it makes sense to use as an opener, and it's very upbeat and will draw people in. And I like that it's kind of bracketed with the penultimate track, Do You Want to Dance, their cover. These two are often put together. They were on the same original LP, they were both in the live set, and sometimes they're even paired up in the live set. So I like that they're there to kind of bracket the album. And I like the Graduation Day, which is the live version from Beach Boys' concert album, is included at the end. This way, if you didn't like live tracks, you could just lift up the stylus and be done. You wouldn't have to listen to it. That's something that the previous release that used a live track, Best Volume 2, didn't really do. It was kind of just smashed in there randomly. And I think the album ending on Thunderous Applause is also a kind of a good message to be sending. But the rest of it is just a complete scramble. I've never been able to find a pattern. These surf songs, car songs, covers, and ballads, and everything just kind of smashed together. Spirit of America was the end, the eponymous song, Spirit of America, was the first end of the first side. I don't know what the deal with that is. It just feels lazy, like they started to kind of plan this, and then they just kind of gave up and threw everything wherever it landed, and that was that. it's disconcerting, but it doesn't necessarily ruin the album either, because everything is still close enough together in time that I think it's able to stick the landing okay. Giggins, one of the premier Beach Boys YouTubers, redid the track list on here, did a brilliant job kind of sorting the songs by, you know, their topic or by their style, and that worked really well. And I recommend checking out his review of this too, and he goes into much more detail on it, and did a really nice job kind of reshuffling the songs there. So I rank Spirit of America not even so much as a hits package, but one that fits more so in with the intermediate releases. The ones that combine obvious major hits along with kind of second tier songs and then rarities and oddities. These are examples of other intermediate packages in the Beach Boys catalog. I talked about them some in the intro video to this series, because Spirit of America maybe isn't the best thing to give someone who's just getting into the Beach Boys, but someone who already knows those hits and is familiar with the group, especially their early and mid-60s work, they're really going to eat this up, because there's a lot of stuff here that isn't super common, that isn't super well known, but at the same time there's enough accessible songs that people can kind of ease themselves into the labyrinth that is the Beach Boys discography. That was certainly my experience with it. Perhaps it was yours as well. So we got to talk about the funky artwork. Endless Summer went with Psychedelic Beach, or in this case, Psychedelic Plants. Worked pretty well, I thought. This one's definitely going for Psychedelic Americana. You can see off-brand Mickey Mouse, off-brand Playboy Bunny. You can see them playing golf on the moon. I don't know, I think it's a little weird. I don't know that it suits a lot of the songs on here. Humphrey Fauxgart down at the bottom, Statue of Liberty with a wig on. Barry Goldwater is up here, but his name is written in the periodic table of elements symbols. Discount Paul Revere. And we also have Supperman, because he's sort of like Superman, but he's carrying popcorn, as you can see on the front of it there, and a hot dog, as we can see up there. Some releases have a sticker where he has a speech bubble coming out of his mouth and it has the track list on it. Mine doesn't have that. You can see Discount Miss America. All these like sort of American images, but not quite, kind of uncanny valley stuff. I don't know. To me it's a little weird. It gets weirder because, excuse me, I can't open a record and talk at the same time apparently. I do like the photo collage showing the group in mostly like the late 60s, mid to late 60s. That's a nice touch. And Dick Clark, who surprisingly isn't really changed to off-brand Dick Clark. You can even see American Bandstand on the drum. No doubt they cut enough off to avoid a lawsuit, but it's interesting that they did all this kind of like sort of correct but not really imagery, and then kept Dick Clark basically the same. It's a little too weird for me. I'm not a huge fan of this. It's probably my least favorite of the Endless Summer trilogy in terms of like the art style. But it is definitely eye-catching. It does indeed stand out. So let's look at the records next, I think. Not a lot to see. Just like Endless Summer. Capital Orange. 1 and 4 share a disc, and then 2 and 3 share the other. So if you had a record changer, you could just stack them up on there and you'd be all set to go. So Spirit of America was indeed a success, not to the extent that Endless Summer had been, but certainly enough to give it a good charting position. It peaked about number 8, not too shabby for a sequel, and it went gold very quickly, and indeed you can buy it on 8-track or cassette, and as I already showed you before, you can also buy it on CD. Here's the CD from the 80s. One thing I love to do is look and see which CDs have booklets and which ones don't. This one, of course, has no liner notes, but it does have an extra flap with that picture collage. That's a nice touch, actually. I like that. Not sure why they couldn't have just done it as like a little paper insert, why they felt they had to make a booklet when they didn't put anything in it. I don't know. But this one was fairly accessible. Not to the extent that Endless Summer had been. I don't think it's been reprinted anytime soon, unlike Endless Summer, which kind of falls in and out of print, but definitely one that if you want it, you can track it down and find it. It's not as obscure as some of the later ones we're going to talk about. So in the end, it's an interesting sequel. It's a good opportunity to dig deeper into the Beach Boys catalog, and it's got some kind of bizarre and daring choices. Is it essential? I think it depends on the level of Beach Boys fan you are. If you want to get past the greatest hits, absolutely essential. If you're happy with just Endless Summer and knowing like the key songs, probably not necessary. Of course, we all know this story isn't over. We'll get to part 3 eventually. But I will leave you with this thought for next time. Do you buy name brand or off brand? Because you will soon see Spirit of America as an off-brand release. We'll talk more about that in our next episode. Thanks for dropping by. Stay tuned for info on Sail on Sailor and the Beach Boys Christmas Tour with the Holiday Vibrations Orchestra. And I hope to see you again. We're back to the Beach Boys for November, everybody. Glad you dropped by. Have a good one. I'll see you later.